Just give me some truth. No short head, yellow belly.
Alright, well, that was something. Thank you. Let's move on to the next presentation. Riley, if you could present on your history topic. Riley?
Yeah, history. Call of Duty is a popular first-person shooter franchise initially created by Infinity Ward and published by Activision in 2003. The original game and subsequent games following its release focused on real-world battles from World War II, attempting to offer gamers the ability to experience war from the Allied perspective firsthand. The game has since then had a number of developers work on the franchise, and the series has expanded, for the most part, to different timelines, with later titles focusing on fictional modern conflicts and futuristic scenarios. Call of Duty is known for its epic action set pieces, intimate and accurate war experiences, and its interesting multiplayer components.
I smacked your mother with a fucking mayonnaise jar, motherfucker. Keep fucking with me.
Okay, when I say you have to present a history lesson, I mean on relevant history.
Apologies, I was getting to that. I think it's important to understand just how dominant Call of Duty was, not just on the gaming market, which I don't think I can understate the influence that it had, but on the real world as well. I don't want to push the argument that video games promote violence. I think that's a separate discussion that requires a lot more nuance than I could provide here. But what I want to express is that Call of Duty is emblematic of the issues surrounding real-world American identity politics and foreign American war policies. I believe Call of Duty provides a sort of lens towards history, one recognizable in the real-world destruction of Japanese cities through bombings and destruction from World War II to Iraq. And though the games are not accurate accounts for both past or modern events, it still simulates a perspective unfortunately characteristic of the military today. I'm sure that most of you will recognize that America has a complex history that it struggles to reconcile with. But this collective cultural dissonance of the Americas viewing itself as a savior instead of a brutal war empire can be seen as early as 1939 in this telegram against carpet bombing, and the thousands of lives lost just a few years after. For a bit of context, during the war's earlier years, every battlefront had used indiscriminate bombings as part of their strategy, except for America, who initially opposed such tactics. This attitude unfortunately gave way to a rather consequential one. The brutality of war necessitates brutality for the sake of victory. This is a tough decision, but it is one that needs to be made to protect our freedoms. It should be noted that the ubiquity of the indiscriminate bombings made it so that when it became time for war crimes to be judged at the Nuremberg trials, no such cases were made about urban destruction. But there was a lot of urban destruction, and just to give you a little taste of what America had done, the goal of the bombing assault, according to the US Strategic Bombing Survey, was to either bring overwhelming pressure on her surrender or reduce her capability of resisting invasion by destroying the basic economic and social fabric of the country. In January 20th, 1945, Curtis LeMay, appointed commander on the 21st Bomber Command after the capture of the Marinas, then led a raid on Japanese cities with B-29 Super Fortress bombers in the summer, while Japan, with limited resources, could not retaliate. The full fury of firebombing and napalm was unleashed on the night of March 9th through 10th, 1945, when LeMay sent 334 B-29s over Tokyo on the Marinas. Their mission was to reduce the city to rubble, kill its citizens, and instill terror in its survivors. With jelly gasoline and napalm that would create a sea of flames, the victims who could not escape the rubble, firestorms or monoxide poisoning, largely women, children, and elderly, suffered the highest consequences. The 65 bombings on Tokyo between December 6, 1944 and August 13, 1945 resulted in 130,000 casualties, 780,000 homes and buildings destroyed, and 2.5 million people displaced. Even with this grim reality, America still believed themselves to be righteous. In July, US planes blanketed the few remaining Japanese cities that had been spared with an appeal to the people. As you know, it read, "America, which stands for humanity, does not wish to injure the innocent people, so you had better evacuate these cities." Half of the leafleted cities were firebombed within days of that warning. Unfortunately, when I talk about the atrocities committed by the US during World War II, these tragedies are often overshadowed by, well, you know.
They actually dropped two.
I do not wish to understate the horror and significance the nuclear bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki had, but it is unfortunate that just because we aren't actively using nukes anymore, that we have seemingly forgotten about the horrors that we have committed, and that which we commit now. This unfortunate precedent set by World War II has rippled out into our future, and worse yet, our video games. To bring it back to that important topic, Call of Duty Modern Warfare, the remake of the 4th game, the first of the Warfare series, and 16th game in the franchise as a whole, Call of Duty has been around for a while. The game claims to be the darkest and grittiest of the series, featuring the true horrors of war. It's got terrorist attacks, interrogations, and death. So much death. In Call of Duty, you get to see war crimes committed by enemy forces. The terrorist attacks are made by their fictional Middle Eastern country. The usage of chemical weapons on retreating forces and their accompanied non-combatants were done by Russians. And the execution of everyone on an airport is carried out as a Soviet plot to start a war. In the same vein, the American consciousness is quick to recognize criminal conduct and genocidal and other barbaric policies within other countries. World War II is largely colored by the actions of the Germans and Japanese, and a modern example would be, the War on Terror. But when the US armed forces torture a man and threaten to kill his wife and child in front of him, or when the US detonates a nuke, or when Captain Price, a reoccurring hero in the Call of Duty franchise, gasses a man for information and kills him, it is always framed as a tough choice, but we need people like Price to protect our freedoms. I think it's easy to just dismiss Call of Duty as just a video game. Most of the games are based on fictional events anyways, but when the primary difference between games and real life is that the horrors are perpetrated by foreign forces rather than US ones, it says something rather poignant. The Highway of Death was a real thing, where America had bombed several thousand Iraqi troops and civilians retreating from Kuwait in the Gulf War. Or the starting of wars on false pretenses, yeah, that's also been done by the US. And if the purpose of indiscriminate bombings is to cause fear and intimidate victims into submission, I do believe that qualifies as a terrorist attack. And the US from World War II has an intensive history of terrorist attacks. Air power remains among the major cause of death, destruction, dislocation, and division in contemporary Iraq, in a war that has approximately taken 655,000 lives in the summer of 2006. Created more than 2 million refugees abroad, and an equal number displaced internally. 1 in 7 Iraqis are displaced. Call of Duty and our own military-industrial complex that inspires it suffer from an inability to recognize the horrors within itself that it so easily and destructively casts retribution onto others for. And while the American consciousness may not recognize its own aggressions, continuing to build military bases onto foreign soil, or using air power to terrorize its civilians, I guarantee that the world will. History has never been concrete or an objective science. It's an ongoing narrative and one that is constantly evolving and changing. And I fear unless Call of Duty or America recognizes that, it'll have dangerous consequences. The former being stagnation of a video game franchise that I don't really care about, and the latter being mutually assured destruction.
See, I don't believe in God, 'cause God don't believe in me. No, I don't believe in God, no, sir. I don't believe in God, 'cause God don't believe in me. See, I don't believe